Um, I know there are a couple items on the agenda. Is the Kiali team here?
Yes.
Did you guys want to give your demo? Should we start with that?
We can do that if you'd prefer.
Yeah. Yeah, let's spend a few minutes doing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let me share the screen then.
Okay. I will stop sharing the notes. Yeah.
You guys can see this, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. All right. My name is John Mazzatelli. I'm dialed in, obviously, over Zoom on my PC, but audio is over the phone, so that's why you see this extra audio call in the participant, in case anybody was wondering. All right, so we're going to do a real quick review of what Kiali is putting together. And there may be some questions that you guys are going to have. I know we're going to want to talk about some things.
So there's somebody that's typing really close to a mic.
Who that was. All right, so I'm going to go over three main parts of the UI here. And I'm going to start at the Istio config first, and then work my way up here up to the graph. But I wanted to show at least this part where you can view the Istio config items.
Is anyone else seeing a black box where he's in the middle of the screen? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where
yeah, it's a there's a window that has popped up on your screen that you need to either move out or close.
What do you see right now? Do you see the Kiali UI?
Yeah, so we see the Kiali UI, and there is a window in front of the Kiali UI which is blacked out, but I think it's some dialog box on your screen which you should close or move out of the way. Okay. Yeah, it's good now.
That was the Zoom, and it was actually behind my browser. I couldn't see it, but I guess screen sharing got screwed up. But okay, which goes to that last agenda item. We're going to go to use something other than Zoom for this meeting, but we'll talk about that later. Okay, so I have the book info demo installed, and I also have a separate test mesh that I have installed that I'll talk about in a little bit. But real quickly, you can see some book info details here. So if I look at the gateway, we can actually view YAML here. I actually have a couple, and this will be important when I show you the graph. I have a couple virtual services. For example, on the detail service, I have a fault injection in front of the detail service that you can see here. And I have another fault injection here where it's going to report 50% of the time, but I'm also routing between the three reviews services evenly, 33, 33, and 34% weight. Another interesting thing about the UI here, well, you can see how we're doing filtering here, by the way, too. I'm sure people don't care, but you can see everything where I can filter on virtual services per namespace, yada, yada. If I actually change, I wanted to show this because this is something I thought was pretty helpful. I just, real quick, I changed and updated this. And what I'm trying to show here is we're doing some validation on the YAML that gets created. So I created this outside of the Istio CTL. I'm on OpenShift. So I just used the OC tool and I created it. So it allowed me to do it. Now I know the gallery stuff is going to start doing some of this validation if it doesn't do it already. I haven't looked in the gallery much yet. But the point here is we can do validation on the YAML, and we could actually show the users problems as they occur. Hopefully that makes sense. I want to put this back so I can get this. So yeah, you saw I put it back. All right, so the idea here is you can look at the Istio config items, right? And you can be told if things are good or bad. I find it useful, so I figured I'd bring it up. I like looking at the YAML rather than having to do, you know, cube control get to look at the YAML.
Yeah.
The service link here, now we're actually going to add another one over here. We're not quite sure how we're going to do it. We're thinking of adding a workload item on the left here. But right now we've got services, and here you can see obviously the book info service. If I clear this, you can see all my other ones. Right.
Has this been updated with 1.0?
This is running 1.0 right now. Yes, this is running 1.0 right now.
How do you detect Istio service? The Istio like icon next to some services.
This is telling you that there is a sidecar on this.
Sidecar on the workload that provides the service.
Okay.
Yeah.
All of the workloads.
This is why I say we're probably going to add a workload item over here, because recall that Kiali was running previously on 0.8.0, and we didn't really have a notion of workload back then. But now that the telemetry, at least, is exposing workload more as a first-class concept than service, we're going to start doing more of the same. We're going to start showing workload as a more of a first-class entity here.
So to be clear, we're running against 1.0 right now, but what you're seeing is a development version as we sort of furiously rush towards getting a 1.0 compatible version. So it's in progress.
Okay.
So here you can see we got some error rates. This is because of my fault injection that I showed you that I've already added, and it'll be more clear when I look at the graph. But again, I just wanted to show you this stuff. So I click in the product page, and here you can actually look at what the pods are, the deployments, virtual services. Now, if I go to virtual services here, and I look here, I get a more of a graphical representation of what the YAML is. Right, so you got the sums, you get the weights, you got the matching of the URIs, and then you can obviously go look at the YAML directly. I can go back. We're still contemplating what we're going to change here. There's going to be workloads over here. We're getting rid of source services probably. Again, we've been talking to our user interface folks about this. And, you know, this is a good plug here. If anybody in the community wants to contribute to what they think the Kiali UI should look like, how it should work, go over to the Kiali GitHub or our IRC or mailing lists or Google groups and start chiming in what you want to see. All right, so that's basically this, right? Hopefully it makes sense what the general concepts are. Now we'll go to the graph. It's namespace based. Let me first show you my other test mesh here. So I just have a test mesh where I have this is not a sidecar enabled pod, but this is a traffic generator. It's just spitting requests into my mesh. I have 4 workloads for deployments. Actually, I should say 4 apps, and there are 2 workloads per app, version 1 and version 2, version 1, version 2. And you can see as I hover over, or if I even select, I focus and I highlight just the edges and the nodes that are related to this. But this is kind of noisy, right? I'm seeing every workload in every app of this namespace. So we've came up with this concept of a versionless graph. So we're looking at an app graph with versions, but if I make this versionless, it basically collapsed everything. So now we're just looking at the app, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I were to change this and go back to workload, we're going to go back to what we saw here, but the labels will be different. So we have the app graph versioned and an app graph versionless. Then we have a workload graph. And that's going to show you, notice there's no boxes because there's no app version here. It's just workloads. And you can see the node labels are actually, these are my deployment names. I'm in Kubernetes, right? So these are deployment names. They're not, has nothing to do with the app labels here. So we're still trying to figure out how best to provide these different views. But the fact is that we have these views now. We're just trying to now figure out a good way to
So what's
allow the user to pick it.
What's the input to produce all this? What are you reading?
We're reading this graph here. We're looking at the Prometheus telemetry. We're looking at the new Istio 1.0 telemetry.
Okay.
We're looking at, I've got, well.
But in general, are you also reading CRDs or?
For the Istio config part, obviously we are, and the services we are.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, that said, we also have health checks in here, and I think we're doing more than, no, actually, I think we are still looking at telemetry for that. Well, let me go to the book info demo, and we could talk a little bit more about that.
So real quick, to follow up on that, so the backend for all of this is querying Prometheus. There isn't like a Kiali backend that you've built on top of Prometheus or anything, right?
So there is a Kiali backend, right? So this UI is talking to a Kiali backend written in Go. It's a deployment that we've deployed in the Istio system namespace. And what the UI is just basically saying, hey, Kiali, tell me what the graph looks like. The server side will now do the Prometheus queries required to give us the representation for this graph, right? So any badges, I'll give you another example. Like if I look at the request per second, now notice the edges have labels here. We're going to fix out, the alignment of these labels. But the point is, I can show requests per second for each edge, or response times.
Okay. Yeah, no, the reason I was asking is because for some of the other integrations, there was an introduction of an edge template, which was meant to capture edges in your workloads or in your mesh. But that obviously doesn't go into a Prometheus backend. And so I was just wondering if there's a place maybe in the future that could be consumed by Kiali as well.
Well, we could consume things like that, yes.
Okay. But anyways, now we're stabbing.
Okay. All right, so here's the part that we're not entirely happy with. So if anybody wants to chime in, or again, even if you want to just do it later off the call. Here you can obviously see our product page, the version apps, version 1, 2, 3, the version 2 and 3 go to ratings. We all know this from the book info demo, right? Now, I have, like I said, fault injection rules in place. In front of details, half of my requests from product page of details are going to fail. Same thing with reviews. That's what you see. Now, what's up with these nodes here? In my book info demo that I deployed, I actually changed slightly the Istio demo. And what I changed was the value of the app labels. If you remember, the service name and the app labels are all the same string in book info. So the details app label is called details, and the details service is called details. But technically, they don't have to be the same, right? Your app label could be whatever you want, different from your service name. So I made my app label different than the service name to see what does the telemetry look like in a graph format if somebody's service name is not the same as the app value. And this is what you see. So in the telemetry, when a client-side fault occurs, and in this example, product page is trying to go to details, right? The telemetry knows nothing about the workload where that request was going to. So product page sent a request to the details service, but it never got there. So there's no workload, right? There's no destination workload, but there is a destination service name of details. Now that's different than the details app, because notice this request successfully made it. So from product page to details that successfully made it, I got a 200 response. The telemetry tells me the service name is details, but the destination app is details app. And it's the same thing with reviews, right? These are all successful. Product page went to V1, V2, or V3 are reviews, which means the telemetry is telling me these requests made it to reviews app, so I can graph it that way. However, when a client-side error happens and product page tries to send it to reviews but fails, the telemetry knows nothing about the app. So it knows nothing about reviews app. It only can tell me product page tried to go to reviews. So the destination service name is reviews, but we have no clue that it's anywhere related to the reviews app workloads. So that's why these notes here look screwy.
It's actually going to matter when on the client the fault occurs, right? If the fault has occurred after it has selected an endpoint and there is a connection reset or something like that, in which case you actually know the exact endpoint that you're trying to go to.
Yeah, but at application level, like this is Istio level fault where you don't select endpoint. Well, I feel like what we should be doing here is selecting app for the service.
Right.
Not the service, right? So maybe look up an app label
on the service. So if we label both of them?
Yeah, I mean, I knew about this kind of problem, but like I feel like there's a need for higher level abstraction, and the service is just not the right thing. Destination.
Yeah. It looks like a very similar abstraction, though. That other abstraction is also very similar to the service abstraction.
Well, if we're gonna do apps for workloads, might as well do apps for services.
Yeah, that'd be confusing. So
you still have to somehow keep them in sync, right? You still have the same problem that you could label service differently than you label the workloads.
Yeah, of course.
That's what I was trying to see what would happen if I did do that. The app label is different than my service name.
Yeah.
This is what happens. So, I mean, that's one issue, right? The other issue, I guess it's related, right? How do we represent that in the graph? How do we represent this client-side error? I don't have a good answer. But just
I don't know either.
Telemetry, this is what we got.
I think we just have to call out that I mean, the circle's misleading because you then think it's an app, but if you had some perhaps other shape that signifies service. So, I think we need something that signifies that it's a request to a service that failed as opposed to a request to upload.
So that's,
I mean, one other alternative is that we can actually show, we can decompose the one node into two, right? And then show that, yes, the first thing is to route to the service, which is virtually routed to the actual workloads. And then those two are explicit edges. And then you know, okay, well, you just got to the first part. So you know where you wanted to go, but you couldn't reach there. And then if you could reach there, then there will be another arrow from the service to the workload.
Yes. So as a matter of fact, let's see if I have.
Oh, you mean I have an edge actually being the service?
Have an edge.
Yeah, we were thinking have a separate service shape, service node, and you would actually see a detail, or better example would be a reviews node up here. And you have two edges, one to reviews and a one to reviews app, showing you that it got to this, it went through the service into the workload.
Yeah, I think that's the right story.
Right. Yeah.
There's also a problem with the external services because they will have some service defined, but no workload.
But yeah, that's so. Then you just have the first link, right? You just have the first link which goes to the service, and then you don't know about the workload, so your graph ends there.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
For inside the mesh, you know all the way to the workload.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point. We should see what this looks like with an external service. Maybe.
Well, I mean, it should look similar to how the details looks, right?
It's exactly
there is nothing, yeah. It's like going out, and then there is nothing. Now, in that case, both.
For an external service, it would still go out. It would go out to egress instead, right? Or something.
Right, we'd have an egress gateway somewhere in there.
Yeah, so you can see here, I've shown, we've got the ingress gateway.
Yeah.
So presumably, I don't have the egress set up, but presumably we would see one over here too, if it's going out.
So egress gateway is actually explicit. Unless you have anything defined that makes it route to egress gateway, it will not go for egress gateway.
Right, it should just go out.
It will just go out.
Yeah, it's analogous to this. So what this unknown here is, if you think of the way the telemetry is, right? I actually went through the product page route itself. So my browser directly hit product page. I didn't go through ingress. That's what this edge is here. This edge here is I did go through the ingress, which then routed the product page. Presumably it's going to be the same thing here. We'll see, edges going out either to unknown. I don't know, actually don't know how the telemetry would show that. Or you would see the egress node here.
Yeah, that's probably the right.
This is something that we'll have to test with, because I know I haven't been running with that.
Yeah, it's somewhat backwards, right? Because for an external service, what's important is that you're actually calling that external service, and then you're calling it either directly or via egress.
Right.
So it almost seems like egress should be in the middle of the caller and the service, not the other way around, right? So like egress either should be in the middle in some other node form or not, and that would just dictate, or it could be an edge type.
Well, you guys can actually change it too. So like it cannot be an edge type, because if it does rewrite service, then
right. That's true. So there is processing involved.
Say, what's the little symbol next to the details bubble and the details app?
All right, so these things that we're experimenting with, we're not sure if we're going to keep them. These are virtual service badges. So if you see they're the little Git branch symbols for now. You can see up here has virtual service. So if I do that, it just tells you, hey, there's a virtual service that's sending requests to this workload or this app. It's just a little reminder to show you that you've got virtual services defined here. This little symbol here, we're going to change this. This just indicates there's a missing sidecar. Now, this is actually a bug because the ingress gateway is nothing but a proxy, right?
Yeah.
That's because we're looking at we're looking for the sidecar annotation, and the ingress doesn't have the sidecar annotation. But if for whatever reason I deployed a deployment in my mesh and I forgot to manually inject the sidecar, you'd see this little badge here, and you go, oh, I need to put a sidecar here. There's something wrong here. That was the purpose of it. Again, I don't know if we're going to keep it or not, but these badges are still under discussion.
It's going to be hard to find those because you don't get telemetry without sidecar.
Right. Yeah, unless it's purely on the receiving side, right? Yeah. But how come the unknown to product page doesn't show that?
It's probably special processing. We probably say, well, we know this is unknown. We know it's not going to have one.
Okay. Oh, okay.
That's it that I wanted to show for the demo. I just basically just wanted to show you guys what we're working on and what things look like and how we're using your telemetry that you're producing.
So by when? So the Helm charts will start working with new Kali fairly soon. Do you know when that's, or is it already?
We don't
working?
know when. I mean, we're thinking.
Okay.
It's not months. You know.
Okay.
We're thinking, you know, weeks at most.
Okay.
So you guys all saw what we did with the Helm chart, right? We had to take the 050 R050, right? Because it just would have been completely broken. People would have got into Kiali and things just wouldn't have looked right. So we thought it was best just to have the Helm chart fail to pull the image.
Yep.
Anyway, the one question I did want to ask before I hand it back over to Doug was a question that we had, the Kiali team had today, was the notion of the uniqueness of app and version combinations. And what can we assume if we have a unique app version combination? And more specifically, if I have an app foo version 1, can I assume that that is a one-to-one relation to some workload? Or can I have multiple workloads with app foo version 1 labels on them?
Yeah, I think we have a problem with even across namespaces, right? Because we don't do any validation of labeling.
So right now, let's just consider within a namespace. Assume
you have. So you're thinking that you would have multiple deployments which have the same app label and the same version label?
Yes.
So there's nothing that's going to stop you from doing that.
Understood.
I don't know what we want to say.
Is it considered a misconfiguration, or can someone think of a valid use case for that?
Yeah, it seems like an anti-pattern to me.
That's what we originally thought, and then I said, well, it's technically possible, like you just said. But yes, we're thinking, while it is technically possible, it seems like it's a misconfiguration there.
Yeah, I would think so, unless you use some other thing to identify the distinction between the workloads serving as the same application. Like you extrude version for something like my special version. I don't see why. Yeah, I agree. I think it's just an anti-pattern.
Okay. All right. We sent an email to the Istio dev list. If you all want to look at what the question was about, but that basically answers the question. I think we agree.
Which is the answer we wanted, so that's good.
Cool. All right, that's it for me, unless anybody has any questions.
Thanks very much. I know that I had sort of been asked in a couple different settings if there was going to be a demo of Kiali, so this was perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I think the next thing on the agenda is the check combinators discussion. Claude, do you want to lead a discussion of that?
Sure. Can you hear me well, or should I turn on my mic?
Or
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay. One second. Okay, so this echo.
So now we can't hear anything, guys.
I'll sit next to Doug.
Okay, and now there's echo again.
I'll sit next to that. So I sent a doc, this doc about a week ago, and the problem that I'm trying to solve here is how do we let the check adapters to give back routing directives to the proxy. And that led me to thinking how we can actually combine different decisions across different rules. And because it's not clear to me whether we should associate this directive with the rule or with some higher level policy. So I wrote a doc about how do we combine rules in general, and I found that we have a very strict policy how we do it, which is basically an end of all rules that we have in Mixer, and that doesn't always solve the issues of, for example, how do we do whitelisting in the case when you want to have an optional, you only have two rules and you want to select based on one of them, not both, and that's not currently possible. So I proposed to add another config to describe how we combine several rules, and that's what the doc is about. And I also added to that config a routing directive, so the operator can decide which adapter contributes to the directive. The way it would work is that the adapter would produce certain attributes, and then the config can reference those attributes by some namespace of the rule. That way you can have control over what adapter actually sends to the proxies. So I have a few high-level questions how we actually should proceed here in the first place, because I'm not quite certain that adding another config is the right approach at all. But that's sort of the least invasive solution I could find, because we already committed to using these rules, and we already have a certain assumption about how these rules are combined. So I don't know if I should go over all of it, or I should just let people comment or read more about it.
Yeah, maybe sort of describe some of the. Do you want to just walk through the config that you're proposing?
Yeah, so I added a check policy config that is basically a combination of a set of rules, and then how you do logical combination of those rules. And another part of it is directive template. A template is just a stringified version of directive in the proxy, where each string is an expression, and expressions can reference attributes that rules produce using certain key, which is like you just put $ rule and then dot adapter attribute in that namespace.
So
that's the general idea.
So perhaps this is naive, but I'm wondering, given that we have an expression language, couldn't we use expressions to express relationship between rules instead of using kind of laid out YAML config?
Yeah, so that was one of the ideas, is that maybe we should just avoid YAML approach altogether and just take a whole program, because it's a big expression, and then use rules as like function applications.
Yeah, so it's still in my, I really want to move Mixer to a point where the configuration produces a full function that takes attributes in and an answer pops out. And config compiles down to that thing. So then you can have a full language and loops and functions and macros and whatever.
So Martin, this in the very specific form is just about format, right? The schematized YAML can be expressed as an expression and vice versa. Are we actually not talking about full program? I mean, we can. That's always an option, but I think that we have to decide at a higher level whether we want to have this sort of sophistication and complexity in the dispatch logic itself, or these sorts of higher level things actually reside like outside Mixer in adapters and in other places. Because I agree that this is a way to actually implement RBAC-like thing in the Mixer front end or Mixer policy language itself. But we also have RBAC adapters in multiple places which do a more focused approach to that. So the real question is, do we want to get deeper into this? And if we feel that current and is just way too restrictive, which sometimes it is, then yes, perhaps we need to do a little bit. But just going all the way down and saying now you can write a program where you can have arbitrary logic and loops and all that stuff, it can certainly be done. The question is, is that the right place to do it?
Well, so, okay, I do think the current model is certainly too restrictive. I'd like to expand that if we can. So, and my first proposal is to say, all right, let's say we just want to add extra support, and it's more than just and, we support or, and maybe some like parentheses kind of situation. I think we could express that strictly through our expression language as that it exists today, as opposed to introducing new types of config resources where you have to list the rules and put, like, say this is or versus this is.
I think it's a bit more complicated because of the way the match conditions. So every rule has a match condition, so it's not just a function. When you go into negation and like how to combine those things, it gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, but if
it's
you
not good, like,
scroll down a bit to what you had before. So no, down. Yeah. So yeah, I want to see the stuff that's above.
Mac.
Oh, yeah. You want to go up?
So you have this check policy that lists a bunch of lists rules and then ors. That what you have in the clauses thing could just be as an expression of using the rule names. Right? So it'd be a lot simpler.
So of course, because this is just AST basically. I mean, this is just structured form of expression.
It's just a format.
What I want to clarify is that we need to think about more than just expression. We need to compute the validity bound. There's also defaulting things that are not as obvious from expressions.
Yeah, that's fine. But what you have, the comment that you have, this is logically and or whatever. The user should just write that.
Yeah, so, of course we can do that. That's certainly an option.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I didn't have time to read your whole proposal yet. Probably by tomorrow. I do think the value is we need this kind of functionality within the Mixer context. And separate from that, if the long-term roadmap, we end up with a general runtime that can evaluate these things, we get to decide the language that's above that runtime. Right? So how restrictive it is, how general purpose it is. It's orthogonal to what the capabilities at a runtime underneath. Because we've been talking about using the WebAssembly runtime, for example, as a underpinning for all this stuff. And obviously you can do whatever you want in that runtime.
Yeah, I mean, that's my goal is to basically define a spec for this. What exactly are we doing in dispatch logic so we can lift it all out of Mixer and move it anywhere we want. But currently it's a bit of kind of hard-coded and in the code, which is not ideal. So if you can make a decision what it should be like, and then we can just implement it in Mixer, that would be easier to move forward with moving that logic anywhere you want.
Yeah.
So can I inline rules here?
That's not an idea. I should probably allow inline rules. So it could be a replacement for this rules completely.
Right. This to me seems like a V2 of the spec or something, right? Instead of having to write two different.
But the only issue is that you cannot write rule as an expression. Right? It's a combination of the things. So maybe we should just start by defining what is an expression for rule. Otherwise, you cannot combine them.
And who writes these? That's the other thing, right? Who defines what is to be combined under?
So we need some scoping, and I assume that there is only one policy per scope, because otherwise it backs to the combination of policies, and that's not what we want. And currently we scope by namespace, so I assume there's only one policy per namespace.
Does that mean anytime anyone adds a rule, they have to update this combination logic, right?
So there's two ways. You can either write a like explicit combination, or you say it's all AND or it's all OR. Because we can't break compatibility anymore, right? So we cannot. If people already write rules and expect to be ANDed, it's difficult to tell them to just, this is not going to work if you add another one. That is, if you write this policy and it's explicit rules embedded in the policy.
Well,
I do like separation rules and policy.
I think from a compatibility standpoint, if you just say, look, if there's no check policy resource, then it's all and as soon as you add a check policy resource, from that point on, for that namespace, you're on the policy plan, and all your rules must be listed in the policy. I think that's a reasonable.
That's also, yeah, that's also reasonable. Yeah.
What about stuff in Istio system, or are we? I guess we're going away from that.
We should probably start talking about how we migrate away from that.
Yeah. So a namespace scoped policy, so then they would be independently namespace scoped, right? Istio system will have a document like this, which will produce an answer, and a namespace will have another one of these that will produce an answer, and then you.
So I like sharing of rules though, because like currently with the default namespace, which is unfortunately Istio system, you can reference that rule from anywhere, and that gives you some sharing. If you put rules into the policy, then you have to copy policy everywhere, and that's I mean, yeah, it's orthogonal, but yes, I mean there is normalization has its benefits. Yeah, so
I mean, is that, do we think that that's how people will write policies and rules as atomic functions that are passed around and reused, or do I write a whitelist policy once and it's specific to one application in a namespace and that's it?
I mean, there's always templating option, right? People can always template these policies, and
yeah,
that it's not ideal.
Yeah, runtime. Well, either you do it at CI/CD time or you do it at runtime.
Yes, I think our trajectory here is to do combinations statically, and at runtime, don't do any kind of hierarchical lookup or anything. So that this kind of stuff is going to appear as part of the galley work that we're doing. So,
if the galley can combine things, that's awesome.
It's not really solving the problem; it's just moving it to a different place. So you still need to have a model on how to do this kind of stuff.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Did you guys look at models that don't require other resources? I'm worried that this is going to be, like, in practice unusable due to complexity. Like, so I don't see in this doc any, alternatives considered, other ways of doing this, other options. Right? It's just presenting one option that doesn't seem that great. So I'm wondering what were the rejected options. Right? What other things?
So we have only one resource called rule, and you can just make rule be the policy.
No. So as opposed to, say, in the existing rules, be able to say, like, oh yeah, this is, this is an allow rather than a deny default or whatever. Right, like I think there's other ways that don't require a separate wrapper resource that then now you have to manage those and figure out how those all get connected and wired up. And
so actually, that's
understanding this system.
That's not true.
The level of complexity is going to be impossible.
So I think that I don't think what you're saying is equivalent, right? You cannot express things at the rule level that you can express at the combination level. So there is just a difference of there is a feature gap between them. If we are okay with that feature gap, then yes, then we can just add like more properties and booleans and things like that to the rules themselves. And
what is the feature gap you're thinking of?
Oh, you can have, so let's say that in the most abstract sense, right? We dispatch to 5 different adapters, and the ultimate answer that you want is like A or B and C, or like some big combination like that, right? That you cannot express with putting any booleans in individual rules.
Not necessarily. But you can do other things that would let you express that in individual rules.
I mean, you can do allow, deny, and like precedence. So, but I'm not sure it's actually simpler.
Right, like you can mark
then you
things
have
as kind of, you know, optional, right? Like fall through versus not fall through, basically, right? Tell it. You can say whether things are or and. You only get one level, right? You don't get arbitrary complexity, but I think I'm arguing arbitrary complexity is probably bad. Like we should just solve the immediate missing use cases and not design a programming language without actually letting them just use a programming language.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't allow and or ors. So like it's just the ands of whitelists. There's some structure. It's not arbitrary nested.
Right. So ands of ors would be very, very easy to do.
Yeah, ands and ors are
just in the rules without adding a check policy thing.
Well, you need an ordering and a precedence.
Yeah, you need some sort of ordering and precedence. But.
Yeah, so the problem is, right now the rules are all equivalent. There's fundamentally by definition no order in them. So either you need to put numbers next to them saying this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At which point I'd argue your complexity factor is not really reduced. You've distributed the complexity. Make it.
And rules can have overlapping match clauses, right? Which I think is one of the things. You have to do precedence across all matches, right?
Yeah.
Well, so if all you want is ands of ors, then, so I think the ands of ors breaks it. The complexity part is if you actually want grouping, where you say one of these three things need to be true, and one of these 4 things.
Yeah.
If all you have is, you know, any of the ors need to pass, and all of the ands need to pass, right? I guess I'm asking, is that enough? Just adding like the minimal, saying like, you know, being able to mark things saying one of these need to pass. And actually, if you needed to, you could do named groups, and then now you have ordering too. But maybe that's not great. I mean, my meta comment is just I'd like to see more of a discussion of alternative ways of solving these problems.
Also, and one alternative is to say what we have right now is good enough, and the next step after that is supporting a real programming language, period.
Right, like that should be one of the options considered.
Because all this stuff would be so much easier to just write simple functions in JavaScript or something, as opposed to all this YAML stuff.
Well, for some definition of easier, right?
It's definitely easier to write and difficult to analyze, and difficult to maintain. Yes.
And also loss of individual resources and the access rights, so that you don't have control.
So one other thing is, right, is in this case, it's expressing a combination over rules. The other alternative, which actually I think is more natural, is to express combination over results of adapters only directly. You don't care how you reach the adapter, right? There may be multiple paths, all of which dispatch to some whitelist, and the combination that you want ultimately is what did the actual adapter say, not how you got to the adapter.
Okay, so that basically means in a single rule.
Handler, exactly.
That means in a single rule having expressions over handlers instead of just having a list of handlers. Right, so
like expressions over the actions?
Expressions over the handlers, actually.
Over the handlers.
Right, not correct. I mean,
it's a function call. Handler over template is just a function call. So I guess you want to combine those.
Correct. So because ultimately handler answers your question, right? Yes or no or whatever it is. And now I want to combine those results. I don't care what rules they were attached to.
Yeah, it's over the handlers plus the instances supplied to them, right?
Okay. Handlers plus the instances supplied to them. Yes. Probably.
I mean, the only difference is that now if you have two the rules must share the match clause, right? So
And that's,
Right, but match clauses shouldn't affect this, right? Like match clause only affects whether a rule is fired or not.
right, but if you have calls to handlers from different rules with different match clauses and you want to combine them, how would you express that in the context of a rule?
So no, you don't express that in the context of the rule. So this, like what I'm saying requires a higher level constant that says dispatch to whatever adapters you want, and rather than ANDing the results, here is the actual expression that I want you to use to combine them. So it doesn't go towards simplification, but I think it's closer to at least the way I think about combining responses from backends.
Well, yeah, so right now in the rule, you specify the list. Given this rule, I want to send these instances to these handlers. So if instead of just a list, or if you just added another stanza that says, okay, given all these handlers I'm calling, please apply this resolving expression. And it just ends, so it's an expression that operates over the results of those handlers. That'd be a single additional line in config to support this. You still can't combine multiple rules results together. But I'm not sure that matters.
Well, that's what I was asking. I mean, if about the inlining earlier, right? Like, how often are you writing things that combine atomic rules versus in the context of one rule? I don't know
So the only problem I have actually solved is if you write a directive that says inject two headers from these two rules, how do we do that?
Inject.
Where do we put this thing? Right?
Okay, can you explain?
So you have two adapters that are used to like the headers that you need to inject into the response.
Okay.
So I write a template saying use those two rules and put the headers. Where do I put this template? Is it in the rule one of the rules, or is it another config, or is it combining multiple directives from multiple rules?
So I think we're about out of time, and I know there was other stuff on the agenda. Maybe we can, I think this warrants more discussion and some thought on the mailing list and in the doc. So let's continue to do that and maybe continue this discussion at the next meeting.
Sure.
I don't know that we have time for streaming protocols layering.
So yeah, just a question came up to support WebSockets, and how do we model that?
The upgrades, right?
The upgrades of from HTTP to WebSocket. Do we represent it as a HTTP or WebSocket, or how do we describe it?
Okay.
If anyone has a good idea, then let us know.
All right. And then I know.
Is someone going to write a doc on the streaming stuff? Like a proposal?
We could, yeah.
Yeah, we'll write a proposal. Kuat and I can. Okay.
And then was it John or someone that had added moving back to using Hangout for this call, or was that someone else? I didn't.
Oh, I added that.
You added that?
Yes.
That wasn't me, but I hate Zoom, so I go for it.
Yeah. So if we moved to Zoom because of the number of connections or something like that, right? The number of users.
Yeah, I mean, April had suggested that everyone use Zoom at some point. So.
Yeah. So there are two reasons. One was the scale. The other one is the fact that Zoom works better when no Google people are involved. If it's a Hangout, then the Google people need to be online for this thing to work.
Oh, so I think that we can fix by just creating the Hangouts not from the Google org, and then you don't get the outside Google crap all the time. I think at least from within Google, this experience is not very good at all. Like we have.
Part of it's just monitors burned out.
Anybody use Blue Jeans? Has anybody used Blue Jeans?
Oh,
Okay.
That's on IBM.
I've used it in the
internal Red
past.
Hat, we use Blue Jeans, so
I think it's just
oh.
as bad as Zoom, but I've used it. I don't love it.
Okay.
Meet is
Yeah,
great.
I-
If we can fix the problem.
So I think like realistically, Hangouts or Zoom, and if we go back to Hangouts, I can set it up such that it's not owned by Google.com, and then you don't have that problem.
And
You don't
this
have the
meeting,
problem of.
and Hangout scales to 50 people, and we're nowhere close. So let's just switch back.
Okay, unless there are any objections, then we'll plan on getting it set up to figure out the recording and everything else, but that's easy to do.